In our previous slide or in our previous lecture, we have talked about ER diagram and enhanced ER diagram, where we have seen how the concept that we have found in object-oriented programming, that is inheritance, can be implemented in entity relationship diagram in form of subtype and supertype. So today we will go to the next step. We have a diagram, that means we can draw ER diagram. So after drawing ER diagram, what we should do? So our target is to establish a database. Drawing a ER diagram, how can help us, or how these drawing help us to create the database, is basically the process that we are going to learn. So first of all, we already have learned drawing the ER diagram. Now we will see how can we convert the ER diagram to relations. Now here we are not saying relationship. Relationship is relationship between two entities. Remember, like where we have cardinality, we have cardinality constraint, we have three different types of relationship. It could be unary, it could be binary, it could be, what is the third type?
Ternary.
Ternary. Very good. So we have unary, binary, ternary. So this is based on the participation, number of participation of the entity in the relationship. Now here we are not saying relationship, we are saying about relations. So relations are pretty much something, relations are something which looks like a table. Now here we want to start with the basic definition. As you can see, first of all, data structure. I believe you already have done data structure course, so there should not be any issue. So data structure is basically organization of the data in a meaningful way. So we have to organize the data in a meaningful way. In case of database, data would be organized in a tabular format, and these tables are known as sometimes relations. Okay, these tables sometimes referred as relations. Now tables should be having number of rows, number of columns. Now what we call the rows? Rows are known as what? Rows of the tables is known as what?
The entity.
No, table is entity. The table could be considered as an entity, but a single row, for example, student is a table, right?
Yes, sir.
A row should contain information of a particular student. That particular student would be what?
The instance, is it?
Instance. Very good. So a row is nothing but a instance. And columns, what are the columns?
The attribute.
Very good. Columns are attributes. So when we do data manipulation, we use SQL, standard query language, to manipulate the data. We will see SQL after midterm. And data integration or data integrity is very important concept, and this is the place from where we will learn more about data integrity. One of the thing has already been shown to you. You have seen when we are drawing the ER diagram, we define something as primary key. Remember that? Primary key.
Yes, sir.
Apart from Asia, can anyone else tell me what is primary key? What is a primary key?
Sir, primary key means basic information of the.
I specifically mentioned without Asia, apart from Asia. So Asia is not one who would be answering. Anyone but Asia should answer this question.
স্যার প্রাইমারি কি হচ্ছে একটা অ্যাট্রিবিউট যেটা মেম্বারটাকে ডিফাইন করে।
Primary key is an attribute. This part is correct. The second part you are saying which define the member.
That identifies the member. It has all the Instances.
Okay. Anyone else?
Sir, primary key
Asia,
gives
can we hear from you at last?
প্রাইমারি কি হচ্ছে ইউনিক আইডেন্টিটি যেটা ইয়ে করে আর কি
So unique.
আইডেন্টিটি
What do you mean by unique identity? By the way, you are right, but what does that mean?
ইউনিক আইডেন্টিটি মানে স্যার প্রাইমারি কি দিয়ে স্যার আমরা মানে একদম মানে আমরা স্যার এটাকে মানে ক্লিয়ারলি এটাকে আমরা ডিসক্রাইব করতে পারতেছি বা এটাকে চিনতে পারতেছি আর কি
Okay,
Sir,
Asia.
Sir,
Can
unique
we?
identifier.
Sorry. Ono, you are saying something?
Sir, unique identifier of the record of the data.
Okay, Khadija, you are saying something?
Sir, the primary key is the key that can help an entity to identify itself.
That helps the entity to identify itself.
Yes.
Correct, but it
And
would be
also
more
if the-
precise. It would be more precise if we consider the instances can identify itself. So this is basically how the instances are different from each other. So Asia, what was your answer?
স্যার অনেকে তো বলে দিয়েছে, আমি অ্যাকচুয়ালি এগুলাই বলতাম।
Okay, so same thing. So primary key is something through which one instance can be different than another. For example, if we have a table for student ID make one student different than other. So this is basically how the instances are getting different. Okay, so this is basically one of the integrity that we have seen. Now mind this very carefully. Can primary key have same value in a same table? Can we have same value for a primary key in the same table?
Sir, by value, do you mean the characteristic?
By value, I means the value. By value, I means value.
স্যার একটা টেবিলে তো অনেকগুলা ইনস্ট্যান্স আর পার্টিকুলার স্টুডেন্ট থাকবে, তো একটা পার্টিকুলার স্টুডেন্টের জন্য প্রাইমারি কি হলো ডিফারেন্ট, মানে এটা পার্সন টু পার্সন ভ্যারি করবে।
For example, value means when I am saying name is the attribute, and value for that attribute in case of mine would be Mahadi Hassan. My name is Mahadi Hassan, so the value for my instance is Mahadi Hassan. Okay, so this is what I meant by value. So I'm saying primary key can't have same value in the same table. Is it true or false?
False.
True.
Primary key can't have same value. It is true or false?
ট্রু স্যার
False.
Sir, true, because same জিনিস তো
Okay,
বারবার
Asya, why you are saying false?
স্যার একটা ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল স্টুডেন্টের আইডি শুধু সেই পার্টিকুলার স্টুডেন্টের জন্যই মানে অ্যাপ্লিকেবল আর কি, অন্য ওই আইডি দিয়ে অন্য স্টুডেন্টের কে পাওয়া যাবে না। আমি এই সেন্সেই বলছি স্যার এটা ডিফারেন্স বা ফলস।
So what was the answer? What was the question? The question was, is it possible for primary key to having multiple value in the same table? So can we have multiple value of the primary key?
No, sir, not in the same table.
Not in the same table, we can't.
Sir, a
So
table can only have one primary key, so that's why it's
one
not possible.
table would be having a primary key and the value can't be repeating, because if the value repeats, then basically the instances won't be able to identify itself from another one. So if we have same ID with two students, then how can you differentiate these two students? It is not possible. So that's why we can't have same value for a primary key in a particular table. Okay, so this is basically one of the data integrity rule. So in this way, there are many other rules that we will learn in course of time. So this is basically rational data structure. So first of all, relation, as we have mentioned, relation is basically a two-dimensional table. In this case, you can see like we have employee 1 where we have employee ID, name, department name, and salary. The primary key is identified by here the primary key is employee ID. How can we identify this is a primary key? How can you identify this is a primary key?
Uppercase.
Employee ID is primary key. How can you identify?
The
By the
line
underline.
and the
Sir,
Underline.
underline.
Very good, very good. Underline, underline. This is basically how we can identify the primary key. The primary key could be composite. We have mentioned those things in our ER diagram. Once we are drawing the ER diagram, we have mentioned primary key even could be composite. That means multiple attributes together is basically making the primary key. So it is not only one attribute that is enough to identify a particular entity. That's why we might need multiple attributes to identify the entities, which Khadija has mentioned that primary key is nothing but which helps to identify an entity. So how we are defining it? The entity is identifying itself. How they are identifying itself? By their instances. So the values of the instances should be different in case of primary key. Another constraint is there, which is known as foreign key, which we already have seen, but we haven't much discussed about this thing. So this is basically primary key. Foreign key is primary key of some other relation is known as foreign key. So how this happens, we will discuss very shortly. But foreign key is something, a primary key for another table, but it is here when it comes to some other table would be known as foreign key. So these are some properties of the relation.
স্যার ফরেন কি লাইক দুটো টেবিলকে লিংক করে দিবে এটাই তো
For an example, let me give you example here. As you can see, department name in this case, okay, department name is nothing but a primary key of department table. This is primary key from department table, but this is in employee 1, right? So since this was primary key of another table, that's why we have dotted this one as foreign key. Okay.
ইয়েস স্যার থ্যাংক ইউ
Okay. First thing, how can we convert the multivalued attributes? We have talked about that. Like in an entity, there is a chance of having multivalued attributes, right? We have mentioned that. So if there are multivalued attributes, we have to get rid of multivalued attributes. Here we have repeating group. Here we have a repeating group. If you can see, for employee ID 100, Margaret Simpson, who is from marketing department with a salary $48,000, has completed 2 courses. One was SPSS, which was completed in June 19 some year, and another course on survey, which was completed on October 7th. Okay, so that means what? That means these 2 courses have been completed by whom? By Margaret Simpson. If we have similar type of cases, for example, here we can see Chris already have completed 2 courses. One is Visual Basic, another is C++. Susan already have completed 2 courses. One is on SPSS, another is on Java. Okay, so these are the cases where we are having multiple attribute, but in form of repeating group. Why it is repeating group? Because it is not only one thing that has been repeated. It is basically course title is multiple course title, and this is date completed is also multiple, and they are related. Which course has been completed when, that is explained by date completed. That's why we are saying this is on top of multivalued attribute. We can consider that as repeating group. So in case of repeating group, we have to simply, to overcome the repeating group, we have to simply put what? We have to simply fill in the blanks. So Here, this row should be filled up. So who has completed this survey course? Who has completed the survey course?
Sir, Margaret.
Margaret Simpson.
Margaret. So if Margaret has completed the survey course, then we have basically fulfill Margaret ID here, isn't it? So as you can see, doing so, we fill up all blank spaces, and now we could see there is no repeating group, right? Is there any multiple attribute in any instance? Is there
No,
any
sir.
multiple
No, sir.
attributes?
No, sir.
There is no multiple attributes. But my question, employee ID is primary key anymore?
No, sir.
Why not?
Sir, because there are multiple employee IDs of the same.
Asia?
স্যার প্রাইমারি কি তো রিপিটেশন মানে রিপিট থাকতে পারবে না, সো এটা তো স্যার
Right.
দুইবার আছে।
Right. So if an attribute need to be primary key, there can't be any repetition. But what we found for Margaret, for Chris, and for Susan, we have repetition, right? So then the constraint, primary key constraint, are we able to fulfill the primary key constraint here?
No, sir.
No. So if we can't, then basically there is a problem. Okay. So that means the rule, the normalization, the primary key rule is basically violated here. Can we say that?
Yes, sir.
ইয়েস স্যার।
So here we can mention the primary key rule has been violated. Now, how can we overcome this problem? Any suggestions? Any suggestion? How can we overcome this problem?
We can eliminate the employee ID part, the double employee ID part, and join
If we
the other.
eliminate double entries, what will happen? We will go back to the previous stage,
Okay.
right?
Yes, sir.
That was the problem, and to get rid of this problem, we have come here. Now you are saying again going back to the previous stage. We can't do that. What can be done? So in a relation, in a table, if you found one key is not sufficient enough to identify the primary key, what do we do? What do we do?
We declare another primary key.
So if the primary key is not enough, what we do? We make
Composite key.
composite primary key. Very good. So now this is a place where we can apply this rule, and to make a composite primary key, which attribute or which attributes we must select?
Employee ID.
Employee ID is there, but it is alone employee ID cannot identify each and every
name, department, and salary.
Sorry.
Employee ID, name, department, and salary.
So if you combine these four, even combining these four, you can see this is repetition. Whole thing is repeating, because name is dependent on what? Name is dependent on what? Employee ID.
So employee ID.
Very good. Department is dependent on what?
Employee ID.
Employee
Sorry,
ID.
name.
Salary is dependent on one.
Employee
It is
ID.
also dependent on employee ID. So these three are dependent on employee ID. So combining any of these with employee ID won't make any difference, because this can be identified by employee ID. Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So these four won't work. So what next?
Foreign key.
So what next? So this combination is not working. So what else we can do?
Foreign key.
Foreign key. What is foreign key? We are supposed to do composite primary key, right?
The course title.
So what is our objective? So don't move here and there. What was our objective? Our objective was one primary key. Employee ID is not able to make this a primary key. Why? Because employee ID is repeating. The value of employee ID 100 has been repeated, 110 has been repeated, 150 has been repeated. So employee ID alone cannot be the primary key. That was the problem, right? So we want to make composite primary key. We are not going to make foreign key. So we are willing to make composite primary key. Arnoy was saying employee ID along with name, department ID and salary, we can make a composite primary key, but we found name, department name and salary, all these three are dependent on employee. So combining this with employee won't be helping us. So what else we can do?
So employee ID के opposite कहाँ जावे ना?
Sorry, employee ID के?
Sir বুঝতে পারছি না।
So what is the Khadija, do you have any answer?
Sir, what about the course title or the date? If the
Very
others-
good, very good. So what you guys are so afraid of saying
Sir,
something?
it's not afraid.
Because we here our task is what? Here our task is making composite primary key. We have to try with all possible combination. So once we see name, department ID and salary is not working, so what would be the next step? We have to combine employee ID with course title or employee ID with date computed. That's simple, isn't it? Because we have to make it composite. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now tell me one thing. So we can either combine employee ID with course title or date computed. Which one we should do? Tell me. Okay, before doing it, can you tell me this course title, is it dependent on anything? Course title, is it dependent on anything?
No, sir. No, it is
It is dependent on what?
employee ID, sir.
How?
স্যার প্রত্যেকটা এমপ্লয়ি আইডির জন্যই তো স্যার ডিফারেন্ট কোর্স টাইটেল।
Very good, very good. You are saying each and every employee ID should be able to identify a course, right? That's what you are saying. But
Yes.
think about very carefully. 100 is associated with SPSS. At the same time, 150 is also associated with SPSS. Then how come employee ID is uniquely identifying the course?
Sir, department name.
Okay, same thing, I believe, because department name is dependent on employee ID. Okay, so this is basically one of the logic that I would like to share with you. If you are dependent on someone, let's say Mr. A is dependent on Mr. B. So A is basically dependent. Okay, A is dependent on whom? A is dependent on B. That is basically what I am saying. That means B can identify A. Okay, so who is dependent in this relation? Who is dependent and who is determinee? What I have mentioned, A is dependent on B. So who is dependent and who is depend?
Sir,
who
B
is
হচ্ছে আপনার sir B independent and
sorry,
A হচ্ছে
B হচ্ছে
sir if A is dependent on B, then sir B is independent.
okay. So we don't say independent, we say determinant. We say determinant and dependent. So
So, sir,
A
B
is
is
dependent and B
and B
is
is determinant.
determinant. This is basically how we show the relationship. Okay, B determines A. This shows B determines A, or A is dependent on B. So if B can determine A, that means here, as you can see, if let's say if this is my B and this is my, let's say, A. Am I right? B can determine A. Can I say so?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so employee ID can determine department name. Make sense? Is it okay so far? Please tell me if you are not getting it, because these are really very important concepts. You need to understand these concepts. Should I repeat?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here we have mentioned employee ID can determine name, employee ID can determine department name, employee ID can determine salary. All of you agreed with that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
সবাই এগ্রি করছেন?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if so, if I consider employee ID is equivalent to B and department name is equivalent to A, can I say B determine A? Can I say so?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
সবাই বুঝেন এটা?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
now one of the question that that was told, এখানে এরকম একটা কিছু বলা হয়েছিল that B, এরকম একটা প্রপোজাল এসেছিল, খুব সম্ভবত অন্যয় বলেছিল না কে বলেছিল, I can't recall. B can determine C. Let's say this is C. Okay, what does that mean? এরকম একটা প্রপোজাল একজন দিয়েছিলেন না আপনারা?
Ji, sir.
অন্যয় দিয়েছিলেন?
Ji, sir.
Okay, so what we have said,
Sir, course গুলা মিল আছে, যেমন SPSS দুই জায়গায় আছে, দুইটা আইডির জন্য।
so this is not right? We have mentioned this
Yes,
is
sir.
wrong. Why? Because employee ID cannot identify the courses. Okay, make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so can course, if employee ID cannot identify courses, just an argument, if B cannot identify C, can A identify C?
No, sir.
Why not? Why not?
Because, sir, sir, A তো dependent
I think
ছিল B এর উপর।
Noor-E has mentioned this one, right? Noor-E, আপনি বলেছিলেন না
Yes, sir.
A can determine C?
জি স্যার।
Okay, so why not? আসি, আপনি বলছিলেন কিছু।
স্যার, আমি বলছিলাম যে B তো ডিটারমিনেন্ট,
হুম
where A is dependent on B, তো B যদি C কে মানে আইডেন্টিফাই না করতে পারে, তাহলে তো স্যার এও পারবে না।
বুঝতে পেরেছেন আসি কি বলতে চেয়েছে? all of you get it? So
Yes, sir.
if someone who can identify me is not able to identify someone else, then how can I identify that someone else? Because I am identified by A is identified by B, B is not able to identify C, then how come A could identify C? It is not possible. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Noor-E, then C cannot be identified by B, so C is dependent on anyone else? So definitely I can cross this one, because this is also dependent on B. I can cross this one, right? This is because this is also dependent on D. So C cannot be identified by employee ID or name or department name or salary, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. if so, C can be identified anyone else? Can C be identified by anyone else?
No, sir.
No, sir.
If
Sir,
not,
completed date, sir, completed date.
mhm,
তো স্যার
জি জি বলেন, কম্পিউটার ডেট কি বলতে চাচ্ছেন? আপনি বলছেন এইটাকে এটা দিয়ে আইডেন্টিফাই করা যায়?
No, sir.
Now think logically. A course can be started any time. Like database course has started 3 times a semester, right? So you can continue the database course in spring, someone can do it in summer, another one can do it autumn. In 2018, 2019, 2020, anytime you can do. So how come database course, this course title could be represented by the date completed? Can you say that?
নো স্যার
No, we can't. We can't. Very good. So all of you agree with this one as well. So if
Yes.
course title cannot be identified by anyone, then can we say this is also a very strong type of attribute?
জি স্যার
Then can we say this can be possible part of the composite key?
Yes, sir.
So therefore this should be our part of the composite primary key. Okay,
জি স্যার বুঝতে পেরেছি বাট স্যার একটা বিষয় একটু বলবেন
ji
এখানে
ji sure.
স্যার এখানে যে কোর্স টাইটেল যেটা রিপিটেশন আছে এটা কি কোনো ইফেক্ট করবে
Mhm.
কম্পোজিট প্রাইমারি কি যেটা ওটা স্যার যে
Okay,
যদি
okay, okay,
রিপিটেশন
okay.
থাকে
Very good question. I believe very good question. That is, we are saying like SPSS is repeated, right? As we can
ইয়েস
see,
স্যার
the SPSS দুবার এসছে. But what is the primary key? Primary key এখন কোনটা? What is our primary key?
কোর্স টাইটেল
No. Sorry, wrong. You are wrong.
Employee ID.
No. Khadija. What is our course? What is our primary key now?
Sir, employee ID plus course title.
Very
That's a
good. We have a composite primary key, employee ID plus course title. So now you have to check with both. For an example, 100 SPSS. Is it repeating with anyone else? 100 SPSS. Is it repeating? Answer is
নো স্যার
No, sir.
no. 100 surveys repeating? Answer is no. 150 SPSS. This is different than 100 SPSS. That's why these two are different. Make sense? So therefore,
Yes, sir.
making composite primary key, we can make them separated. Okay?
ওকে স্যার থ্যাংক ইউ
Yes,
স্যার
sir.
একটা কোশ্চেন স্যার
জি sure, বলুন।
সেটা হচ্ছে স্যার এমপ্লয়ি আইডি আর কোর্স টাইটেল যদি সেম হইতো তখন কি আমরা স্যার ডেট কমপ্লিটেড এটাও কি আমরা ধরে নিতাম কিনা স্যার?
Exactly. For an example, it is very possible in case of student, you are repeating a course several times. You can repeat a course, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So in that case, student ID and course ID could be same for 3 to 4 times.
Yes.
So the question that you are asking, is it possible that employee and course title could be repeated here? Yes, it is possible. In case of student table, student and course, this combination can be repeated if you repeat the course.
Yes.
So how can we then basically make the composition?
And date completed date.
No, student এর ক্ষেত্রে তো completed date বলে কিছু নেই. Semester. In that case, we would be having semester.
Semester.
A particular course, a student can enroll in same course twice in a same semester, right? So
Yes, sir.
you can't do database course twice in one semester, right?
Yes, sir.
Make sense?
Yep.
So this is basically what we are talking. Okay, so the question that you had, is it possible to have repetition? Yes, there is a chance, in not in case but in other cases. Yes, there is a chance of having repetition, and here if we had any repetition, definitely the date completed could be different. Then basically you have to consider date completed as well. Okay,
Okay, sir.
is there any further question?
No, sir.
Okay, very good, then let's proceed. So these are the integrity constraint. I believe I already have mentioned about those things. So what is primary key, how primary key should be defined, this is basically what it has been discussed. And here one of the important thing is null value may not be assigned on attribute, may be assigned to an attribute. No other value applies when the applicable value is unknown. But remember one thing, in case of primary key, it might not be null. Primary key can never be null. Okay, so null value can be assigned. For example, you don't have any mobile number. Can I put your mobile number in the data entry? I can't.
No.
So I have to keep it blank, right? So this is the reason for having null value. But can your ID be null? Can I keep the ID null?
No, sir.
No. So primary key cannot be null, right?
Yes, sir.
So therefore my question, here you can see this is null, right?
Sir, can you repeat
So
the question?
we have mentioned earlier, primary key can never be null, right?
Yes, sir.
Now
But
here
here it
in
is
course
possible.
title, which is also primary key, composite primary key, that is part of the primary key, how come course title is null? So please keep this question in your mind. We will discuss this shortly. The next part is referential integrity. So referential integrity means we have some relation with one table to another, as we have mentioned, like as you can see, department name. We have mentioned here, department name is what? Is what type of attribute? Department name is
Foreign key.
foreign key. Why department name is foreign key?
Because it is a primary key for another entity diagram.
Not another entity diagram. It is primary key for another entity.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. This is primary key for another entity. That is why it is foreign. Now the question here. Let's say we have 10 departments. Okay. I'm running a company. We are having 10 departments. But due to Corona crisis, I have to shut down some of my departments. So I left out with only 3 departments. I basically get rid of employees of other 7 departments due to Corona crisis. Is it possible to have this kind of situations?
Yes.
Yes, very much. Sab jagah cost cutting hocche, right?
Yes.
All of you agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
If so, then there could be some employee. The employee information, in the employee information, you can see I am getting rid of some departments. Then the department, what will happen with this table? Because here department ID is there. So some of the departments are no longer required. Some of the departments has been removed, right? Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Some of the department has been removed. So what we can do with the employee whose department is no longer there? So there is a problem. So this kind of problem is known as referential integrity constraint. So in this case, these are the three things that we can do. One, we can set null value to the foreign key. So employee is there, but department has been removed. So putting null value on the department. Or we can simply say, okay, you have employee there, you cannot remove this department. So this is restrict. Another thing we can do that is known as cascade. That means, okay, if you want to delete this department, then remove all the employees of that department, then remove this department. Okay. So these are three ways of handling the referential integrity constraint. Clear?
Yes, sir.
স্যার সেট টু নাল এটা একবার একটু বলবেন?
Set to null means, let's say here, if the department name is gone, department is gone, then basically we are saying since there is no department, put a null value because the value of department is gone now. So this is basically set to null. So put null value. Null value কিভাবে হয়? This is basically put
জি
nothing.
স্যার।
Put nothing for the department name. This is called set null. Okay.
আর স্যার রেস্ট্রিকশনটাও একবার একটু বলেন। আমি স্যার
Restriction means you can't remove. You are saying, sorry, you can't cut my job because my department is there. So employee would be saying you can't remove the department until or unless there is an employee assigned to the department.
ওকে স্যার, থ্যাংক ইউ।
And cascade says, okay, if you want to remove the department, then remove all the employees, then remove the department. Make sense?
ইয়েস স্যার।
Yes, sir.
So these are some cases where we would be having a referential integrity. As you can see, customer ID is in order relation. দেখতে পাচ্ছেন? You see that, right? So this is basically referential integrity. Then you can see order ID is in order line, product ID is in order line. So this is also referential integrity. Okay. Now my question. So whenever some other primary key comes to a relation, it is a foreign key, right?
Yes, sir.
So foreign key is basically dotted line or dashed line, right?
Dotted line.
Yes.
Dashed line, right? Foreign key. Why? Sorry?
No, sir. Please continue.
So why this is not dashed line? Why this is solid line here? Why it is not dashed line? Because product ID is ID of product table, order ID is ID of order table. Why this is not dashed line? Any answer?
Sir, maybe they're composite primary key, that's why.
Right. So primary key is more powerful than the foreign key. That's why if something is primary key, you don't need to mention this is also foreign key. If someone is primary key, you don't need to identify their foreign key, because primary key, if it is a primary key, what we need to do, we need to underline, right? So we already have underlined them. So if you underline them, we don't need to mention they are foreign key. But to understand their foreign key, what we have done here, is there anything else that has been done in case of foreign key? Is there anything else? Can you see anything else here in the diagram?
There is, sir, an arrow
Arrow,
from
sir.
order line to the order.
Very good. There is an arrow. Arrow is pointing to what? Pointing
To
to
the
the
primary.
The order ID.
source or the primary key, right?
Yes.
Arrow is
Yes,
pointing
sir.
to the source or the primary key. Similarly, here there is an arrow which is pointing to the source or the primary key. Here there is an arrow which is pointing to the source or the primary key. So these also identify this is a what? This is a
Primary key.
huh?
Sir, which one, sir?
foreign key.
The arrow.
Oh, the arrow is foreign key, sir.
Very good. The arrow represent this is a foreign key,
Foreign
but
key.
underlining them, we mean this is primary key. But by having the arrow, we means this is primary key. At the same time, they are foreign key. Make sense?
Foreign key.
Make sense?
Sir, I think we're having a delay in the video stream. That's why it's getting a bit confusing.
Okay. So what do you watch now? I think this is at this time this is okay, or
Like if there is any big change in the frame, then it gets pretty slow.
okay. So let's move to the next slide. Can you see the next slide?
No, sir, I'm still in the same slide.
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Sir,
Okay.
now
Sir,
we
এখন
can see
দেখা
it.
যাচ্ছে।
Now we can see.
This is a problem. Anyway, so here what we are trying to mention, we are looking at the relation. How can we make the relation better, which is known as well-structured relations. So the way of making well-structured relation is by removing all possible anomalies. Anomalies are some difficulties that might occur in the database. Any kind of anomalies means there could be some problem, there would be some redundancy, the problems would be there. So this is basically known as anomalies. So anomalies need to be removed. So how can we get rid of anomalies?
By deleting them
By deleting them from what?
from the data sets,
From the
table, I meant.
from the data set.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So how do you do that?
First, we have to find the
ও
anomalies.
restrict
Then
করা
we
যায়।
How do you do that?
So can we restrict it?
Can you sorry, Noor-E, I didn't get you.
স্যার রেফারেল ইন্টিগ্রিটি কনস্ট্রেন্টে লেখা ছিল যে রেস্ট্রিক্ট করা যায় টু প্রহিবিট দ্য ডিলেশন অফ দ্য কাস্টমার। So can we do that?
Yes, we can do that. Definitely we can do that. So anomalies are of different type. Okay, anomalies are of different types. Anomaly can occur during insertion, during update, during removal of data. So there could be different types of anomalies. So on those time, whenever we are facing any problem, we need to be aware of the anomalies so that we can get rid of the anomalies whenever they occur. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir. স্যার আমরা অ্যানোমালিস গুলো বের করার জন্য কি কোনো চার্ট ইউজ করতে পারি? লাইক সাপোজ যে ডেটাটা পাচ্ছি ওটা একটা টেবিল বার চার্টের মতো যদি হয়, তাহলে লাইক সাপোজ আমি তো বুঝতে পারবো যে এখানে আমার বিশাল বড় একটা চেঞ্জ আসছে, তো ওই ক্ষেত্রে আমি তখন বের করে অ্যানোমালিটা ডিলিট করে দিলাম, এরকম কোনো কিছু।
Yes, you can think in terms of chart. You can think in terms of chart, but we typically we don't refer to chart. Okay, what we do, we most of the cases we try to solve the anomalies by basically removing the constraints or implying the constraint on the anomalies. Okay, that is what we do. So normally we don't have any chart, rather we basically the constraints that are there, we basically apply the constraints. For an example, as we know, if you want to delete something, if we have primary key and foreign key, you can't remove and foreign key, you can't remove the foreign key until or unless, sorry, you can remove the primary key entry until or unless all foreign keys are removed. So this is basically, as you have seen, like there is a cascade constraint could be enforced on the database. Okay, so that
Yes.
might be some sort of constraint that we can enforce so that these anomalies may not arise, and in case the anomalies arise, then basically we have to solve them one by one. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So we will, I hope we will discuss more on these issues very soon. But these are very preliminary. We are just throwing these ideas, throwing these concepts, so that you can be familiar with the basic ideas. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Now let's move to the the main rules of conversion of ER diagram to relation. So now we are converting the ER diagram to relation. How can we make the entity relationship diagram and convert the entity relationship diagram into relation? So first of all, let's assume we have an entity called customer, where customer ID, customer name, address, and postal code, these are all attributes. Can anyone tell me what kind of attributes are these? Customer ID key type of attribute. What type of attribute is customer ID?
Primary.
Customer ID is a
primary.
very good. Customer ID is the primary key. Very good. Next one. Customer name. What type of attribute would be customer name?
Composite attribute.
Sorry. Is it?
Sir, instance.
Customer name. What type of attribute?
So composite attribute.
They're composite because it will have last name and first name.
No. If it is composite attribute, then it should have a specific notation. What is the notation for composite attribute?
Okay, sir. The first bracket.
Exactly. Is there any first bracket?
No, sir.
No, sir. So if there is no first
So
bracket, then
optional.
why? I know. I completely agree with you. Name, address should be composite, but here, whether they have designed it as composite attribute,
Sir, optional.
No, sir.
they haven't designed it as composite attribute. That's why they are simple attributes. They are simple attributes. So in case of simple attributes, what we do, we make the relation the way it is shown in the diagram. We have the customer table, the name of the relation is customer, and we draw a table where we have customer ID as the primary key, customer name, customer address, and postal code. Is it clear? If attributes are in simple nature, we do it in this way. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
আপনার
Okay.
কথাগুলো একটু ভাঙা ভাঙা আসছে স্যার।
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You can continue.
Now, I think Khadija was saying customer name is composite, but here they have shown customer address as composite, right?
Yes, sir.
So what has been done here? Can anyone narrate this situation for me?
Sir, address to composite attribute, but customer name simple attribute as you said.
Yes. I want you to narrate the scenario. So what has been done here?
They make them as a separate entity, as a separate attribute, sorry.
They make what as separate attributes?
The composite attribute, they make it like the customer street and customer city, customer state.
Composite attributeটাকে simple attribute convert করছে.
Okay. Okay. So as per you, they have get rid of customer address. Customer address is not there, right? You can see customer address is not there,
Yes.
but they have the component part. The components are there, right? There are 3 components and the components are there. Okay. Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Next slide. This is what we have. What we have?
Multi-valued attribute.
Okay. And how they have make the relationship? Can anyone explain?
They have made employee skill as another entity,
Mm-hmm.
and then separate with employee ID and skill.
Mm-hmm.
And they took the employee ID and also the scale, they make it as a primary key,
Composite primary key.
a composite primary
Yes,
key.
sir.
Okay. So what they are doing, if I say in case of multi-word attributes, then they have removed the multi-word attribute from the relation. So from employee, skill would be removed. That is number 1 condition. And they will make a new relation for employee skill, where employee ID and skill would be grouped together as composite primary key. Is it okay?
Yes.
Sir,
So
এখানে
these are rules. These are rules. Yes.
স্যার স্কেল আন্ডারলাইনড দেখাচ্ছে, তো স্যার এটা কি ওই যে কম্পোজিট প্রাইমারি কি এর জন্য, রাইট?
It is not composite. What was composite? I didn't get your question.
Sir, here we can see the skill is underlined. So my
Mhm.
question is that, so why we underline that?
Okay. When we I can give you the answer, but just let me ask you another question. When we say a plus b whole square equivalent to a square plus twice ab plus b square, this is a formula. Do we need to know why this is that? Definitely there is a reason how we derive this formula, but we memorize it, right?
Normally we memorize.
Yes, normally most of the time we memorize the formulas. If something is known as a formula, we memorize the formula. There is definition, there's a reason for the formula, but what we do, we memorize the formula. So here the formula is if you have multiple attribute, you have to get rid of multiple attribute, and you have to make another relation with the primary key and multiple attribute together as primary key. That is the formula.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. I got this.
Okay. Now going back to the question why, the reason behind why is basically the discussion that we had here. Can you see the slide?
Yes, sir.
So what was the problem here? Having multi-valued attribute. What was the problem? We had to repeat employee ID. That was the problem, right? Remember? So
Yes,
Yes, sir.
what we have said, we have simply said, okay, get rid of these parts from here. Get rid of this part. That was the new law. If you have multiple attributes, get rid of the multiple attributes. So don't solve it here. So if I could get rid of multiple attributes from this table, the table employee looks very simple, isn't it? There is nothing, no problem. Okay. So and definitely we are getting rid of these, but we have to take them somewhere else. So when we take them to somewhere else, then basically it was mentioned, make employee ID and course title as the primary key. Okay. Make sense? Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And if we could do so, mind it carefully, this problem, as we have mentioned, that it would be solved very soon, won't occur here. So if we get rid of this part, if we get rid of course part, then for the employee for whom there is no course, that entry won't be there in my course table, in my employee course table, right? In my employee course table, I would be having 100 SPSS, 100 survey, 140 tax, 110 Visual Basic, 110 C++, 150 SPSS, 150 Java. That's the entry that I would be having, right? Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Therefore, these are the reason why we follow the rules. Is it clear, Asia?
Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay. Good. Moving to the next slide. If we have weak entity associate with a strong entity, what is a weak entity? Weak entity key.
So other than the identifying entities.
Sorry. The
Sir,
entity.
basically যেগুলো স্যার মেইনলি প্রাইমারি কির উপর ডিপেন্ডেন্ট থাকে।
No. Weak entity doesn't have any primary key. Okay. Weak entity is considered as weak entity because they don't have any primary key. ঠিক আছে?
জি স্যার।
So when someone don't have any primary key, only then they would be known as weak entity. So in case of mapping weak entity, what we should do? We have to make primary key because relation cannot be there without any primary key. For each and every relation, there has to be primary key. But in ER diagram, we could have relations without primary key. Remember associate entity. In case of associate entity, we could keep attributes only. We need to mention the primary key. But here we are saying for each and every relation, we have to have primary key. Now, dependent is a weak entity, but it has to have a primary key. But here we can see what it has. Double line means what? Double line means what?
Partial key.
Very good. Partial attribute, right? Partial key, partial identifier, right?
Identifier.
Partial identifier, very good. So they have a partial identifier, but they don't have any primary key. How can we form the primary key? To form the primary key, it needs help of the relations that it is dependent on. So dependent is dependent on whom? Dependent is depending on employee. Okay,
Yes,
because
sir.
how can we know that? Because of this relationship. This relationship is also weak in type. That means this dependent is dependent on employee. So to understand, to identify dependent, what I need to know whom dependent we are talking about. So dependent of whom? So if you are my dependent, then I have to say dependent of Mahadi. So that's the reason why any dependent should be identified by its employee. So to identify dependent, we need to have employee ID will come here as foreign key and will form the primary key as well. How could we say this is a foreign key? How do you know this is a foreign key?
Sir, আরেকটা entity primary key.
After table, data table, primary key.
Because of the arrow.
Very good, because of the arrow. Now what we have mentioned, I believe you want me to repeat it again.
বাট স্যার একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল স্যার, যখন আমরা সাপোজ উপরে যে ডায়াগ্রামটা আছে ওটা দেখে যখন আমরা একটা রিলেশনশিপ তৈরি করব, সাপোজ এমপ্লয়ি এন্ড ডিপেন্ডেন্ট, সো স্যার এক্ষেত্রে আমরা মানে এই যে যে অ্যারো সাইন তো আমাদের নিজেদেরকে দিতে হবে, রাইট?
হুম।
তাহলে স্যার তো অ্যারোটা যে আমাদের ফরেন কি হিসেবে আমরা এখানে কনসিডার করছি, সেটা তো আমাদেরকেই ডিসাইড করতে হবে।
হুম।
তো আমাদের তো এটা থিঙ্ক করতে হবে যে একটা পার্টিকুলার টেবিলের যে প্রাইমারি কি যেটা, সেটাই হচ্ছে আপনার অ্যারো সাইন ক্যারি করবে,
হুম।
রাইট?
রাইট।
ওকে স্যার, থ্যাংক ইউ।
So but you are not doing it by yourself, you are following the formulas. Okay, so here the formula is, if you need to define a weak entity, the formula for defining the weak entity is you have to get primary key from its parents or from its dependent one. Okay, so dependent is depending on whom in this case? Employee. So I need to get primary key from where?
Employee.
Primary from employee. So what is the primary key of employee?
Employee ID.
Employee ID. Do I have any partial identifier?
No, sir.
Independent. Do I have any partial identifier?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
What is the partial
Employee name.
identifier?
Employee name.
Sir, department name. Oh, sorry, dependent name.
Dependent name. Partial identifier is identified by two lines. Okay. This is the reason why these symbols are very important to me. So আপনার কাছে মনে হতে পারে, okay, instead of one line, let me give it two line to make it more clear, more stronger. Make it two line as primary key. এরকম যদি করে দেন কি হবে? What will happen?
0 দেবেন।
হ্যাঁ
কেটে দিবেন।
এটা তো দিবই। At the same time it would be wrong. You will be losing mark and this would be wrong, because double line means what?
Partial
identifier.
Partial identifier. So whenever I am asking where is partial identifier, if you are talking about employee name, you are wrong. You are not getting the point. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So where is the partial identifier? Which one is partial identifier?
Dependent
name. You identify partial identifier by
Double line.
By double line. So that's the reason why you have to understand, or you have to follow the symbols very keenly. Otherwise it will be very difficult to convert the relation into convert the ERD into relation. So here, as we have mentioned, if I want to create the dependent relation, I need primary key from employee, and these partial all would be combining these would be my primary key. So can you explain why this has happened? The dependent relation, can you explain now? Can you explain this one? Can you explain this one? Yes, no?
Sir,
Partial explain করতে?
sir,
Yes.
multi-valued attribute গুলা এখানে step 1 এ যেভাবে
Is there any multi-valued attribute?
No, sir.
No,
স্যার
sir.
এমপ্লয়ি নেমে আচ্ছা না ঠিক আছে সরি
কি টাইপের attribute এটা বলেন? Tell me what type of attribute is this one?
Composite primary.
Composite, it is not primary key, it is partial primary key, right? It is composite in nature. So if we have seen what happened with composite, we have seen that we don't put the main attribute, we put the composite part, right? Remember?
yes sir
So same rules applies here. So we put the composite part, that is first name, middle initial and last name. First name, middle initial and last name. An employee name is coming as foreign key, and all these four are making the
The
composite primary key. Now, very good. Now, is there any partial key?
No, sir.
Can there
No,
be
sir.
partial key in relation? In a relation, can we have partial key? Answer is no.
No.
In a relation, there has to be primary key. In each and every relation, there has to be primary key. But in ER diagram, we can have partial, we can have no primary key. In ER diagram, this is possible. Okay, but in case of relation, we have to have primary key. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
yes
Yes,
sir
Achha, I can get feedback from only few. I'm getting feedback only from few. Rest of you are sleeping or doing what? Are you there?
Yes, sir.
I'm basically
Yes, sir.
getting feedback from Khadija,
Yes, sir.
Asia, Onnoy, Noor-E, others. I am not getting any feedback. So please stop me or try to get clarification if you have any doubt. Okay? Can I
Okay, sir.
proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
স্যার আমার একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল
জি জি বলেন।
ডিপেন্ডেন্টের যে বক্সটা আছে স্যার এন্টিটির
হুম
স্যার এটা ডাবল বক্স
জি
এটা রিজনটা কি স্যার এটা স্যার উইক এন্টিটি এর জন্য
right. How we
Okay, sir.
define weak entity?
ডাবল বক্স দিয়ে হবে তাহলে
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
There you go. এটা আমরা অনেক আগে করেছিলাম, right?
ঠিক স্যার
Yes, sir.
Any further query? Any other question? No. Thank you. So now we know these two relations. Customer has a primary key called customer ID. Customer name is there, customer address is there, customer postal code is there, and order is another entity which has a primary key. We have order ID, we have order date. Okay, what is the relationship among these two? বলেন শুনি। Customer and order, what is the relationship between customer and order? Are you there?
yes sir
So what is the relationship? What type of relationship is there in between customer and order?
One to
One
One
to
to many.
many.
Sorry, Khadija.
One
You say-
one optional.
Uh,
Sir, one
Khadija,
optional.
you are saying what? 1 to
one to many relationship.
Right. So we have three types of relationship. One is in case of cardinality. One is one-to-one, one-to-many, or
Many to many.
very good. In this case, we have
On to many.
one
Yes,
to
sir.
many.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So in case of one to many, now the rule. In case of one to many, one side's primary key will move to many side as foreign key. In case of one to many, one side's primary key will move to foreign key, will move to many side as foreign key. That is the rule. So what will happen then? Which one is one side?
Customer.
Which one is many side?
Order, sir.
Then one side's primary key is, which one is one side primary key?
Customer ID, sir.
So customer ID will go to where?
Order.
Order
As a
foreign key.
FK, sir. Ji, sir, point key.
Okay. So is it what happening here? হয়েছে এটাই? Can you find this is happening here in the relation?
Yes, sir.
So these represent, this arrow, one to, that means foreign key relation, represent the one-to-many relationship. Okay?
Yes, sir.
The foreign key relation is basically representing the one-to-many relationship between customer and order. Make sense?
Yes.
Can I
sir.
go to the next slide?
না স্যার আমার একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল স্যার এর আগের স্লাইডে।
Mhm.
স্যার এর আগের স্লাইডে ওখানে একটু যাবেন?
কোথায়? কোন স্লাইড?
স্যার এই যেটা এখন আমাদের দেখাচ্ছেন এর আগের স্লাইডটাতে।
This one?
নো স্যার, স্যার ওই যে উইক এন্টিটি যেটা উইক ইআরডি ডায়াগ্রামে একটা ছিল না স্যার,
হুম হুম
ওটা স্যার যে বক্সে যে ডিপেন্ডেন্ট ছিল যেটা।
হুম হুম হুম।
হ্যাঁ স্যার এখানে এই যে এখানে স্যার ক্লেম যেটা ওখানে স্যার ডাবল লাইন কেন?
কোথায় কোথায়?
ক্লেমস।
হুম হুম হুম। কেন ডাবল লাইন কেন? কেন বলেন, আপনি বলেন। You tell me why it is double line.
weak entity.
Weak relationship বোঝানোর জন্য।
ওকে স্যার, ওকে থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার।
So the relationship between the weak entity and strong entity is also known as weak relationship. That's why this is double line. Okay?
ওকে স্যার, থ্যাংক ইউ।
So is it clear? One to many?
ইয়েস স্যার।
Okay. What kind of relationship is this one? দেখতে পাচ্ছেন স্লাইডটা?
স্যার মেনি টু মেনি স্যার এখন
Sir, optional many.
Many to many, right?
জি
And
স্যার
both
মেনি টু
side
মেনি।
is optional. What else you can say? আর কি আছে?
Data
Sir,
completed, sir,
completed.
also associated.
Sorry?
Data completed, sir, associated.
Date of completed associated? এটা কোথায় থেকে পাইলেন?
না, sir.
What is date of complete? Date completed টা কি? Asiya,
ইয়েস স্যার।
what is date completed? Noor-E? Khadija?
Entity of the relation.
Attribute.
Attribute.
ওকে স্যার অ্যাট্রিবিউট। Yes, sir.
Very
In the
good.
first table.
Attribute
First
of
table
the
is
relationship, not relation. Attribute of the relationship. The relationship between employee and course. This is attribute of the relationship. Make sense? So
yes, sir.
whenever we are having many-to-many relation, we have to have a third entity. In case of many-to-many relation, we have to have a third entity, and all attribute of the relation will come here as attribute, and primary key of these two relation, that means employee and course, will come here and form the primary key of the new relation. That is the new. That is the rule. Okay.
Okay, sir.
স্যার এখানে
Excuse
যদি
Yes. বলেন
So
আবার।
what if we don't have the entity of the relation? What we can do in this case?
If we don't have entity of the relation means
Of the relationship, like data.
attribute. Attribute. You are saying attribute, right?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So if there is no attribute, date completed, if there is no date attribute, this is what your question, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What we can
If
do in
there
this
is
case.
no attribute, then we should not have any attribute. Simple.
বাট স্যার আই হ্যাভ এ কোশ্চেন
But there has to be, if it is made to many, we have to have a new relation for that. Both side primary key will come here and make the primary key. That is the norm. If there is any additional attribute of the relationship, that will come here and will be there as attribute of this new relation.
তার মানে যদি
জি আপনার কি বলছেন?
তার মানে স্যার যদি মেনি টু মেনি হয় তাহলে প্রত্যেকবারই আমার লাইক সাপোজ যেমন এইখানে কোর্স আইডির জন্য আলাদা করে কোর্সের একটা হয়েছে স্যার, এন্টিটি হয়েছে, এরকম প্রত্যেকবার আলাদা আলাদা আমার বানাইতে হবে, রাইট? কোর্স টাইটেলের জন্য কোর্স আইডি দিয়ে কোর্স টাইটেলের জন্য যদি মেনি টু মেনি হয়।
No. The thing is, for the relation, what we are doing for this relationship, that is the question. Okay, for the relationship we are creating a new relation. এটা হচ্ছে if in case of many to many, we are creating a new relation. এর আগে কি হয়েছে? For this relation, what we have done, we haven't created any relation. ঠিক আছে, আমরা কি করেছি? We just simply send primary key of one side to many side for this relationship.
Yes sir.
অন্য বুঝতে পেরেছেন?
জি স্যার, আমি এটাই বলতে চাচ্ছিলাম স্যার, আর কি বুঝাইতে পারিনি হয়তো। বুঝতে পেরেছি স্যার।
Are you there?
জি স্যার, আমি স্যার এটাই বুঝাতে চেয়েছিলাম স্যার, কিন্তু মানে আমি